Good morning, Ohio State fans. Welcome back to the 11 Dubcast for Tuesday, November 11th, 11/11, if you will. And I'm joined for this very special edition of the Dubcast, as it always is, by our film guru, Kyle Jones. Mr. Jones, how are you doing today?
It's 11/11. It's our special holiday around the team, right? You guys don't even realize it. There's cakes and parties and stuff that we have every year on 11/11. It's a very special day here.
It's a company holiday around these
Right,
parts, if you
right.
will. But even a company holiday or not, we still had to bring you the Dubcast today. So be grateful that we're here. No, I'm
Content
just
never
kidding. We love to
sleeps.
do that.
Content never
Hey,
sleeps.
That is exactly right. We're going to get into Mr. Jones's thoughts on this game relative to the upcoming episode of Film Study this week, which you can catch on Thursday around noon. But make sure that you're subscribed to the 11 Warriors channel so that you get it as soon as it drops. That being said, before we get into that, we do want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor at the 11 Dubcast and 11 Warriors this Ohio State football season. That would be First Bank of Central Ohio. From game day to work day, First Bank of Central Ohio is proud to support the business owners that keep Central Ohio thriving. They are locally owned, business focused, and always in your corner. Give them a visit at fbcentralohio.com. Now, Jonesy, I'm going to tee you up here for because everybody's going to want to hear what you have to say about this game, but just to provide some context, I feel like I need to address some feedback that we got for yesterday's episode of the Dubcast.
Please.
So listen, this game, Ohio State was favored by 29.5 points. That is the largest spread they've had this year, but only by about a point because they were favored by 28.5 against Ohio. The week prior to this, they were favored by like 21.5 against Penn State, a team that just very narrowly came within upsetting number 2 Indiana the week after this. And despite the fact that they didn't cover against Purdue last week, they're somehow favored by even more points against UCLA going into this week. And now this is back-to-back weeks where they've experienced their largest point spread of the season. This is a very regular thing for if you're supporting the number one team and they're playing teams regularly that the public expects them to be better than. And that is my point here, is that you can invoke the spread without it necessarily being tied to gambling. The spread is something that, yes, is set by the sports books, but it is taking the temperature of the public in terms of what their expectations are for how much a team should win by. It doesn't have to have any gambling context attached to it. So for all the cantankerous feedback that Chase and I got yesterday for the fact that, we were so furious that they didn't cover, everybody, including Mr. Jones himself, we all thought Ohio State was going to pulverize this team and win by 30 points this past weekend, and it didn't happen. So does that mean that we had to have a bad experience with it? Not necessarily. As the point I made yesterday, that game could have easily been 41-3 instead of 34-10. And is that really such a difference in the grand scheme of things? I don't really think so. There's things you can be happy about. And there was certainly weird context around the fact that Carnell Tate got held out and wasn't on the injury report. Something came up during pregame warmups and they decided to err on the side of caution. We're glad they did that relative to the long-term scope of things. But my point here is, you got to get comfortable with the spread being invoked in a non-gambling context when you're supporting a team that is regularly expected to destroy the lower inferior competition it's playing, especially around this time of the season. It doesn't have to have a gambling context attached to it. So you need to get comfortable with that. And if you're not comfortable with it, go yell at clouds some more. I'm sorry. That's just the way that it is. Okay. Be a grown up. This is the Ohio State University. They're a very good football team playing teams that aren't necessarily nearly as good. People have a right to be upset about how the performance was if they deem that they should have beaten them by more or less, because that's the public's expectation, is that they win by a lot. And that transitions me into what Mr. Jones is going to talk about today, because, and I was very excited when he said this, in the immediate wake of the game on Sunday, Jones said in our Slack, and I quote, "This was the most infuriating rewatch of the season by a mile." Now, that is a much more pessimistic taste than the spin that Chase and I tried to put on the game yesterday. So, Mr. Jones, fire away. What pissed you off so much about this game? I would absolutely love to hear it.
it's good. We're going to talk about the offensive line today. We're going to talk about the offensive line on Thursday in the film study, and we're going to talk a lot about guard play, which is a thing people don't typically talk about or like to think about or know much about, candidly, unless you probably played guard or played defensive tackle. And right, there we go. We got one. So we'll have at least one. But I think what was so frustrating is it's not a surprise, it's not a secret that this offensive line has had trouble executing in the run game and executing consistently throughout this season. Even last season, a lot of the same players, there was inconsistency throughout the entire year, right? And then there was a scheme change, there was an attitude change, there were some personnel changes into the playoff, and suddenly they just unlocked a new gear. And that was great. And I think the expectations were set that that was going to be the new normal, especially with, I thought, hey, with Hinsman, with Montgomery, Shabola, Saraveld playing, like you've got four guys that played a ton the year before, and a lot of times at those same spots. And so there was a lot of reason to believe that this should be a very good unit. And you keep seeing things like they're on the Joe Moore Award, shortlist for the offensive line of the year, the stats about not giving up any sacks. And I think when you turn on the film, especially from this week, you just see the problems that have been creeping up just blowing up into, in a scale that is not what you expect and not what you want to see from a team with championship hopes in November. These are the types of mistakes and things that you expect to see in September, right? We talked about it back in September against Ohio. You were like, it's kind of sloppy, but you know what? Let's, the rounding into form, there's some time. And so what do I mean by this this is not necessarily even, this guy's not good enough. It's not guys getting, they're lined up to beat, to block a defensive tackle from Purdue and they're just getting beat. A lot of times it's two guys blocking one guy while the other defender goes unblocked. And that's executional. And candidly, it's happening across the offensive line. I think Tegra Shabola has drawn a lot of, candidly, fair, but also probably drawing a little bit too much of the brunt of criticism. He did not have a good game on Saturday. I'm not going to pretend he has. He has not been the most consistent lineman on the line. He's probably been the most inconsistent. I'll be the first to tell you that. But if you are talking about Ohio State's offensive line and the run game, and if you think that simply replacing him at right guard will solve the problems, I've got some bad news for you, my friend. Like, it is not limited to the right guard position. It is not limited to 77. It is a epidemic across the interior of the O-line. We're going to break down on film study this week issues with Hinsman and issues with Montgomery. I think I'm not going to really judge the right tackle spot because, I think Ian Moore did okay for his first real playing time. Philip Daniels is going to be there, for any, important time. And actually, Saraveld's been the most consistent player on that line all year long. Although I think some of the pass blocking stats are masked by Sayan's ability in the pocket to move around and evade and escape pressure. So all that's to say, this Thursday is going to be ugly if you like offensive line play. And I think the real question I have is that the problems get better as the game goes on, right? And so it's not just hey, Luke Montgomery sucks. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is by the third quarter, Luke Montgomery looks a lot better. That's a problem. And that is coaching. And that is a question that I have about, we know we have a new offensive line coach in there. I don't know much about Tyler Bowen. I've never met him, not trying to call him out or anything like that in the sense of like he's a bad coach, but the product he's responsible for being put out on the field, you have to raise questions about, and you have to wonder why every week it seems though run stunts, twists, blitzes, any movement that happens up front seems to completely flummox this run game. And it's not limited to one player. It's happening across. It's happening with the tight ends. They're missing blocks and misidentifying guys. And that's what we're going to talk about on Thursday. And I think it's a question that is not just about, and this is the point of the whole thing is, this isn't just, hey, Tegra had a bad game and we got to look at a backup. This is a much deeper issue that if it is not resolved, this is going to make this team lose a game in the playoffs.
All right. Well, in case you haven't figured it out by now, Tegra Shabola for this offense is what Caleb Downs is to this defense as it applies to Jones being a staunch supporter of them, which is why he's taking it easier on Tegra this week than the rest of the Ohio State fan base. No, but
Let's not go there. Let's not quite go there. Let's not pretend here. Although I do want to call out one thing. Tegra's getting roasted for missing a block on a screen pass because it got called out. It was on the sky. It was a bad look. Caleb Downs made the exact same play on the first drive, just completely beat a guard. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, Caleb Downs, he's amazing. But I was one of them. I was leading the course. So like, what is it? Is it like bad guard play or great defensive play? I'm sure it's a little bit of both, but like, like, are we just going to roast Purdue's guard because Caleb went on block? I don't know. Questions need to be asked. People are saying.
Well, I think part of the difference is we know at this point that Ohio State, how brilliant the defense has been. I mean, to a historical extent, even. And then you compare it to what the expectation was with Purdue's defense coming into this game, and they were expected to be very bad. And that if Ohio State really wanted to blow the doors off them, they did. And frankly, I think they had a more formidable opponent performance in some respects than people were perhaps expecting, especially as it applies to the run game and why people are feeling kind of let down about that. Now, it is, I did, invoke the fact that, yeah, I did play this position on varsity for 4 years in high school, so I can kind of appreciate what was going on with the interior being kind of a mess. I had a offensive coordinator that was a Super Bowl champion. His name was Fred Miller. He had to block Javon Curse in the Super Bowl where our beloved Eddie George fell merely a yard short of a very glorious ending. I can't remember which number that was in terms of the Super Bowls, but everybody knows the ones that I'm talking about. Anyway, that was a very big man that would get very mad at me. And I had to know as the center, not only my own assignment, but I had to know everybody else's assignment on the offensive line. And if I didn't know the assignments for 5 different players, I would get yelled at. So I bring that up because I think that people need to understand that there's a lot more in play here in terms of the interior guys having to know each other's assignments, and that's a product of team chemistry and just getting comfortable working together, especially within zone blocking schemes where you've got guys that often you're having to figure it's not just a double team and then somebody working up, but it's knowing how much am I really supposed to chip this guy before I then proceed to the next level and then have to pick up the linebacker in the back of the box so that we can create a big enough gap or a hole for the running back to actually do something with. There's a lot more going on than just the kind of traditional meatheadedness that people like to examine the game with and think, oh, it's really that simple and they're just not getting it done. However, to your point, when that sort of stuff is not getting resolved earlier in the season, you traditionally try to give the benefit of the doubt that as they get more playing time together, that experience is what builds that chemistry. And then those issues eventually will work themselves out by the time you get to the later stage of the season. We are heading down the home stretch at this point, and they just played what was on paper not a very good defense, and they were still having these issues in terms of get the interior blocking. And it wasn't just one guy, as everybody is trying to point it to being on Tegra. To your point, it is a problem with the interior of the offensive line in general. Given the fact that they have kind of forced the issue with running the ball against Michigan in recent editions of the game, how can even taking the college football playoff out of it at this point? Because I think it was easy to take for granted how good the running game was last year and just the offense generally compared to what we've had this season. It's easy. It's been easy for us all season to say we're confident that when they want to ramp it up passing the ball that they can do that. And I still think that they can do that. But part of having a lead is being able to retain it, and the running game goes a long way towards being able to salt the clock and hold on to a lead so that you don't give the defense the ball back right away when you're not, you I'm not saying they're going to go 3 and out every time, but you hit snags on drives sometimes. There's a holding play, you get behind the chains or the sticks, and then sometimes you just have to punt. It is what it is. So given all of that, with where we're at this stage in the season, are you concerned based on what happened this past Saturday, given the timeline that we have left and the runway that's left, that they're going to be able to work these mistakes out before they play Michigan? And then if they still beat Michigan, regardless of what happens with the run game, then they got to play Indiana, who's still the number 2 team in the country. And then they're going to have to defend their national title in the college football playoff. The teams are going to
Right.
get much better than this murderer's row of Purdue, UCLA, Rutgers that we have over this 3-week stretch. How do you feel about that relative to your infuriating rewatch that you just had?
Well, I think that's the concern I have is when you look at who they're really going to play. Yeah, they'll beat UCLA and Rutgers without a problem, right? And again, this game on
I
Saturday,
hope.
this the second the second half, the run game looked a lot better. Like it just did, and you could see them adjusting. And I'm going to call out a couple examples of like running a similar run concept, similar blocking concept against a certain run blitz, right? And the way that they whiffed on it the first time, and then a couple of drives later, clearly they had adjusted and they were able to actually handle it. And to your point about, everybody's got to know where they go and who each person has, and that's the chemistry. What teams are doing against Ohio State is they're saying, I'm going to show you a picture. And it's the Matt Patricia idea, right? I'm going to show you one picture pre-snap and give you another post-snap. Now, the thing is in September, you get beat by some of those things. It's going to happen. You don't know what the opponent has. This is how Ohio State beat Texas. Texas had no idea what to expect from a Matt Patricia defense. That was a big leg up. By November, you can have a handful of wrinkles. And to your earlier point about this team being the best team that most teams play, right? You're going to get a wrinkle here or there that they've saved and they haven't shown yet. And that's going to happen. That can happen. And so you get beat on a couple snaps. That shouldn't be happening over and over and over and over again with every twist, every slant, every stunt, every run blitz, right? And this is the problem that I have is like there's just there's not a preparation for what to expect. When they line up straight up, and I can show you a bunch of clips. When they line straight up, Ohio State blows them off the ball. Just absolutely blows this team off the ball. They don't physically have that ability to stand up to this offensive line. But when they start moving guys around, they're slanting a defensive end across the face of the right tackle, which means the linebacker's, coming over the top, and now he's got the outside edge. Though that linebacker's going completely unblocked, and the play is getting blown up, right? Because they're not able to adjust. They don't know to recognize it, and that comes from reps in practice, and those reps in practice come from scouting. And so that's the concern I have because opponents like Michigan, Wink Martindale is going to do this. It's not like Michigan doesn't slant. This is what their defense is known for, right? They play all those games up front. So they're going to deal with it against them. And the one thing that we all know about Indiana is if you line those two teams up, mano a mano straightforward, Ohio State should win that game, right? They have the talent, they have the size. We saw it last year. But Indiana is so well coached and they're so well prepared for each game. It worries me that Indiana's going to turn the film on and go, great, we just got to play games of this offensive line and just keep changing it up as the game goes on. They're never going to figure it out because they just don't come prepared. They don't do their homework ahead of time. And I'm not saying, again, it's the players. What I'm concerned about is it doesn't seem like the coaching staff's doing its homework. A year ago, you said the running game was great. Well, it's because you had Chip. Chip is known for being a run game savant. And it's not necessarily like he was recognizing all the stunts and designing for it. He was just saying, great, I've got a grab bag and I'm going to run 18 different run schemes so that it's putting the onus on the defense. That's not happening this year. You're not seeing that diversity in concept for this run game. You're getting a handful of concepts, which again, you don't need 18 run schemes. That's very unique. You can be really good if you can really execute a handful of run schemes and you'll be just fine. Most NFL teams, that's how they operate. They run inside zone, outside zone, power, counter, boom, done. Great. We move on with our lives. You can win a national championship running 4 run schemes at the end of the day, but you've got to be able to execute them, and you've got to be able to execute them against whatever front is put out there and whatever stunt and scheme. And that is my concern, is that what we have seen from this offensive line in November, it's November 11th, right? We're in the home stretch. Yes, you should be rounding into form and playing your best football. That is not happening on the offensive line. And that is why I am concerned.
Well, so it's interesting that you would heap praise on Chip Kelly then for the job that was done last season. And not without getting into whatever opinions you may have had of Justin Fry, but I know that you did invoke earlier in this conversation. You were wondering about, what is Tyler Bowen doing to get the most out of this group. So I guess my last question for you would be then, if somebody's going to rectify and clean up this situation, given that you credited Chip Kelly for what he did last season with this group, and there's a lot of people in this group that played under Chip Kelly last season. We were expecting this to be a very strong offensive line as a whole because of the experience that was coming back for Ohio State in this offense this year. And I think from a pass blocking standpoint, it's been pretty good. But to you also invoked as well that they've been largely bailed out by the fact that saying, while he's not necessarily known for his mobility, his ability to evade pressure, at least behind the line, and extend plays without necessarily gaining yards upfield has been pretty good all season. But getting back to rectifying the issues that you described, do you think that that's largely going to fall more on what Tyler Bowen does, or is it going to be more the responsibility of Brian Hartline, who's now the offensive coordinator for this group, as opposed to Chip Kelly from last season?
The answer is it has to be both, right? That what happened last year was Chip gave them enough diversity to keep defenses on their heels. They were hesitant to do too much because they didn't know what Chip was going to throw at him. There was so much in his bag that he could just unveil at any time, and everyone knew it, right? Everyone in the sport knows all the different goodies he had in his bag. So you need some wrinkles, right? And it's not like Hartline and Day are incapable, but they are more passing, right? And they are more passing focused. That's what we know their backgrounds are. I think the thing that you're looking for from this offense and what they did last year was they simplified it. They just started running counter, and they ran counter really well because it simplified things. It didn't have the same zone rules, but then eventually, because that's what defenses do and opponents do, is they scout and they go, there are ways to beat counter. The way they're teaching counter is they're looking across the field and going, I'm going to go block the will linebacker. I'm the backside tight end, and I'm going to pull across. I'm going to go block the will linebacker, because that's where you expect your guy to be, and knowing your assignment. The problem is if that will linebacker moves, he blitzes or he pinches or does something, what's your plan? What's your rule? What are you going to do when that will linebacker and the Mike switch spots? And that's the thing that is, opponents are going to do this to Ohio State until Ohio State shows they can stop it. And I think that's the concerning part that has to be on Tyler Bowen and the staff to prepare these guys over the next 2 weeks to show, bring whatever you got, Wink. Bring whatever you got, Sig. We'll be able to handle it. And again, it's not they have to be perfect. They just have to be able to do enough to make you go, we can get 5 yards a pop, or Bo Jackson might break one, right? Or, any of that. And because everybody knows the thing that's the most scary is not the run game. The run game has to be there to take the pressure off of that drop back pass game. Right. And you're seeing a lot more first down passes. And I think that's alleviating thing that's making the pass protection look a lot better, because they're just throwing it a lot more on first down. And you know what? You can't blame them. But at the same time, what are you going to do if they start sitting back and saying, great, we're going to take away, we're going to play cover 2 man on first down. You then got to turn around and say, great, now we'll run the ball, because that's the cat and mouse game in the chess match. And so, who's got counters to the counters? And I'm not talking about the run concept here. I'm talking about, the chess moves. And I think we're waiting to see what that answer is going to be. Right. And I think that's the part why this is frustrating. We're going to break it down this week in film study, because I know a lot of this sounds conceptual without being able to see the pieces on the chessboard. But this week in film study is either going to be the least watched, and I'm going to learn people really do not care and give a what about offensive line play, or people are going to love it. We're going to find out. There's only one way.
I think that I think a lot of people want to remain positive after this most recent game, even though it may have like I said, tried to frame it yesterday. You feel about this game how you feel about it. Either you're willing to look at the context around a lot of the weird stuff that happened and let it go, or there's things that make you pretty concerned. I think the lunatic fringe are going to be very grateful that you're giving them a voice this week. So they have that to look forward to. Unfortunately,
I try to keep them alive. They've really struggled the last, 30 days, whatever it is. So
to the chagrin of Herb Street,
right? I just got to keep them
oxygen into the fire
just enough. And I do, again, I want to be clear here. this is not to say like the sky is falling. This is the end of the program, whatever. What I mean is like there's a real thing to pay attention to here. This is not one of those easily solvable, again, swap out the right guard and it's fixed, or, don't worry, they'll be fine at Michigan. Like, no, man, like I'm getting worried it's in the walls, is what I'm saying. And like that's the concern I have right now. You don't know for sure. We haven't taken the drywall down, but there are signs. There are signs, and I'm getting concerned.
I I feel good based on how high of a level that Saiyan has played at this year, that if this team is going to have to play with its hair on fire to the very end, I think they might be talented enough to get away with doing that.
Probably.
But it would be a lot easier for them if they had a more reliable run game to
100%.
lean on when they've got leads than just having Saiyan throw 45 pass attempts in every college football playoff game out of what feels like necessity. So hopefully we don't get to that point. There's still time for things to improve. They've still got 2 more dress rehearsals before Michigan, if you want to call them that. But yeah, we are getting down the home stretch here, and no team is perfect, but these are the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, and we simply want the best for them. I have to say, you have taken a very interesting position, as critical as you're being. I like that you are not leaning into the main pillar of criticism that everybody else has had, which is just Tegra bad, bench him. You've taken a much more holistic approach in your negativity, and I think we're very grateful for your perspective on that. So
holistic negativity is really what I'm known for. Everyone knows that.
I'm certainly looking forward to film study this week, and I hope that you are all too. So again, that'll drop on Thursday around noon, as it traditionally does. Make sure you're subscribed to the 11 Warriors YouTube channel for when that drops. Give that a like when it does come out. Make sure that you give this video a like too. Leave us a comment. Just don't complain about the spread this time. And Kyle, thank you very much for joining us once again. We always appreciate your guest spot here on the Dubcast every week. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsor, First Bank of Central Ohio. We'll be back with Dan Hope tomorrow. We might talk about the college football playoff rankings, the next edition, but I can't imagine there's going to be too big of a shakeup. So I think we're probably going to talk about a lot of the big recruiting wins Ohio State's had in the recent days. This has been one of their more stellar stretches of late. So I look forward to talking about that with Dan. And thanks for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow. Take care, folks.